The night began like any other, quiet and uneventful, yet a subtle restlessness stirred inside me. I, Daniel, sat alone in the living room, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence of an otherwise empty house. The clock on the wall ticked with deliberate slowness, each second drawing out the weight of Michael's absence. He was away again, consumed by business trips that had become more frequent than our conversations. Though we lived under the same roof, I could not recall the last time we had truly shared a moment. Our love story had once been tender, radiant with laughter and late-night confessions. In the early days, Michael would reach for my hand at every opportunity, as if afraid I might slip away. Now his touch was a memory, his attention scattered, his affection rationed in fragments that felt more like obligation than devotion. I tried not to resent him, but solitude has a way of sharpening every ache. That night, it cut deeply that I wandered through the house, switching off lights in rooms I hadn't entered all day. The walls echoed with stillness, a reminder that I was left behind while Michael's world expanded elsewhere. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught me off guard, the faint lines around my eyes seemed more pronounced, my expression wearier than I imagined. I asked myself if Michael even noticed these changes, or if I had become invisible in the familiarity of our fading bond. Sinking into the couch again, I wrapped a blanket around myself, though the chill that bothered me wasn't from the autumn air. It was the coldness of being unwanted, of lying awake night after night beside someone who no longer reached for me. I thought of the last time Michael had kissed me with genuine desire, and my memory faltered, unable to find a clear answer. A quiet despair crept in, but alongside it, an unspoken craving, simply to feel seen again. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting fleeting shadows across the porch. I tried to focus on a book, but the words blurred, my attention snagged by faint voices drifting through the night air. I paused, listening. Two figures approached from the corner of the street, their footsteps soft but steady on the pavement. My chest tightened, not with fear exactly, but with a strange anticipation that I leaned closer to the window, peering through the curtains. In the dim glow of the lamp post, I recognized them, Ethan and Lucas. They weren't strangers, though I couldn't claim to know them well. Acquaintances, perhaps. I had seen them around, exchanged the occasional polite nod, nothing more. Yet seeing them there, moving toward my house with unhurried steps, unsettled me in ways I couldn't explain. A dozen questions flared in my mind. Why here? Why now, at this hour? Instinct whispered I should turn off the lights, pretend I wasn't home, and let the night swallow them back into silence. But another voice, quieter yet insistent, told me to wait. Loneliness often bargains with reason, and mine was eager for any distraction. The knock at the door was gentle, almost hesitant. My pulse quickened. I stood there for a moment, frozen, my hand hovering near the knob. It was absurd, I told myself. They were just men, ordinary men, nothing to fear. And yet, something about their timing, their presence under that dim porch light, felt charged, as though the air itself carried a secret waiting to be revealed. That I opened the door at last. Ethan and Lucas stood before me, the glow from the hallway spilling onto their faces. They greeted me with warm smiles, casual yet disarming. My words stumbled as I invited them in, though I still didn't know why they had come. The house, moments ago so hollow, now carried the sound of unfamiliar voices. I felt the rhythm of the evening shift, subtle but undeniable. A choice had been made the instant I opened that door, though its consequences remained unseen, and as I closed the door behind them, the thought that struck me most was not fear, nor suspicion, but a quiet certainty. Whatever happened next, the night would not return me to the loneliness I had known only minutes before. The air inside the living room shifted as Ethan and Lucas stepped in, carrying with them a warmth that contrasted the emptiness I had been drowning in. I offered them seats, my voice steadier than I felt, and moved to fetch glasses of wine. The act felt almost ceremonial, as though pouring those drinks marked the beginning of something neither of us had named yet. Ethan, tall with a calm presence, settled into the armchair nearest the fireplace. Lucas, more animated, leaned forward on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees. Their eyes roamed the room, curious but respectful, while I tried to mask my nervousness with polite conversation. We didn't disturb you, did we? Lucas asked with a smile that felt both casual and intimate. No, not at all, I replied, though my heart still raced from the surprise of their arrival. Their visit had no clear reason. They spoke of wandering through the neighborhood, of feeling restless and deciding to drop by. It was innocent on the surface, yet beneath every word, I sensed an unspoken tension. Ethan's gaze lingered longer than necessary, and Lucas's laughter carried a closeness that unsettled me. I wondered if they noticed how long it had been since anyone looked at me that way, directly, deliberately, as though I mattered. The wine eased the stiffness in the air. Conversation flowed more naturally, moving from trivial observations to fragments of personal lives. They asked about Michael, and I hesitated before answering, aware of the careful balance between truth and pretense. "He's away again," I said, my tone sharper than intended. Ethan's brow lifted slightly, but he said nothing. Lucas filled the silence with a gentle nod, as though the absence needed no further explanation. As the minutes passed, I found myself laughing, a sound so foreign lately that it startled me. Lucas had a knack for turning ordinary details into stories that sparkled, and Ethan's dry humor completed the rhythm. Between them, the emptiness that had weighed on me seemed to dissolve. I realized, with a pang of guilt, how easily I slipped into the comfort of their attention, but guilt was not the only thing I felt. There was a charge in the room, subtle yet undeniable. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady, unwavering, as if he could see through the layers of restraint I wrapped around myself. Lucas, in contrast, was more playful, his hand brushed against mine when he reached for his glass, his touch lingering just long enough to stir something dangerous inside me. That I tried to remind myself of Michael. His name echoed in my mind, but the echo was hollow, carrying no weight. What loyalty was I clinging to, I wondered, when the man I was loyal to had long since abandoned the intimacy we once shared? The conversation turned softer, more personal. Lucas asked what I missed most about the early days of love, and the question pierced me. I answered without thinking, being wanted. My voice trembled, betraying me. Silence followed, not uncomfortable but heavy with meaning. Ethan leaned forward then, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, a gesture of empathy that lingered like an unspoken promise. The room grew smaller, or perhaps it was only my perception. The three of us seemed drawn together by invisible threads, bound by curiosity, longing, and the ache of unspoken desires. I knew I was standing at the edge of something irreversible, a precipice from which there would be no easy return, yet I didn't pull away. Instead, I let the night carry me, lulled by their voices, their presence, the intoxicating sense of being seen again. My resolve weakened with each passing moment, as though loneliness itself had conspired to lead me here. When the conversation paused, the silence spoke louder than words. I looked at Ethan, then at Lucas, and saw reflected in their expressions the same question that burned inside me: what happens if we cross the line? I swallowed, my throat dry, my chest tight. The wineglass trembled slightly in my hand before I set it down. A decision was looming, inevitable, pressing closer with every heartbeat, and as I met their eyes, I realized the night was no longer about distraction. It was about temptation, and temptation was already winning. The silence that followed was unlike any I had known before, thick, charged, alive. It hummed between us, threading invisible lines across the room, drawing me toward a choice I had long tried to ignore. Ethan's gaze held steady, unwavering, while Lucas's smile softened into something more deliberate, almost questioning. I could feel the heat of their attention, and in it, a dangerous reassurance. I was wanted. Lucas was the first to move. His hand brushed mine again, this time without pretense, his fingers lingering with quiet certainty. My breath caught, though I didn't pull away. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You don't have to be alone tonight, Daniel." Simple words, but they pierced deeper than I could admit that I should have refused. I should have risen, offered them the door, and retreated to the safety of my solitude. Instead, I let myself stay rooted, caught between guilt and desire, between what I owed Michael and what I owed myself. My heart thundered, my conscience whispered, but loneliness drowned both out. The moment shifted swiftly. Lucas leaned closer, his lips brushing mine in a tentative kiss, as though asking for permission. I didn't stop him. The taste of wine lingered between us, warm and intoxicating, and when I closed my eyes, the world I knew fractured. Ethan's hand settled against my shoulder, grounding me, guiding me further into surrender. I told myself it was only a moment, just one lapse, but every second deepened the betrayal. Desire blurred the edges of caution, pulling me into a space where time felt suspended. I was no longer thinking of Michael, his absence, his neglect, his silence. All of it faded beneath the urgency of touch, the rare, undeniable intimacy of being wanted. The night unfolded with a raw honesty that frightened me as much as it thrilled me. I had not been touched with such intent in months, perhaps years. Every gesture from Ethan and Lucas seemed deliberate, designed to remind me of what I had been missing. My body betrayed my conscience, responding eagerly, while my mind whispered warnings I could no longer hear. When the intensity ebbed, we sat in silence again, though it was a different silence than before, thicker, heavier, bound by what we had done. The living room seemed unchanged, yet everything inside me had shifted. The wineglass still sat on the table, the blanket still draped across the couch, but I was not the same man who had sat here alone at the start of the night. Ethan and Lucas exchanged a glance, unspoken understanding passing between them, before rising to leave. Their departure was gentle, unhurried, as though they knew the weight of the night would remain with me long after they were gone. At the door, Lucas offered a faint smile, not triumphant but compassionate. "Take care of yourself, Daniel." And then they were gone. That I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, the silence of the house returning like an old companion. Yet it was no longer the same silence, it carried echoes, memories, a new ache layered atop the old. I sank onto the couch, pressing my hands against my face, torn between exhilaration and despair. What had I done? The question circled endlessly, offering no clear answer. Was it betrayal, or was it survival? Had I simply crumbled under the weight of neglect, or had I uncovered a truth I had long been avoiding, that my heart sought connection wherever it could be found, even if it meant breaking the rules I once vowed to honor? Michael would never know, I told myself. He would return from his trip, distant as always, and life would resume its hollow rhythm. But inside, I would carry the memory of this night, a reminder of how fragile fidelity becomes when starved of love. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the echo of Ethan's words, "You don't have to be alone tonight." They were meant for one evening, yet they lingered like a challenge, a truth I could not easily dismiss. That night, when those two men came, nothing in my life remained the same. The next morning arrived too quickly, sunlight spilling through the blinds as if intent on exposing every secret of the night before. I woke on the couch, the blanket tangled around me, my mind replaying fragments of Ethan and Lucas's departure. Their voices, their touch, their presence lingered like an echo I could not silence. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let myself drift back into that memory, but the weight of reality pressed harder. Michael would be home in 2 days. The thought landed like a stone in my chest. I had betrayed him, not in thought or fleeting fantasy, but in action. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Guilt coiled inside me, sharp and insistent, but beneath it lay a quieter truth I dared not name. I had felt alive again. That I moved through the motions of the day, coffee, dishes, tidying the living room, but everything seemed tinged with unreality. The wineglass I had abandoned on the table glared at me like evidence. I washed it slowly, as though scrubbing away more than residue, but the guilt clung stubbornly, immune to water and soap. By afternoon, I found myself standing before the mirror in the hallway again. My reflection looked different, though I knew the change was invisible to anyone else. My eyes seemed brighter yet burdened, my face both heavier with shame and lighter with some forbidden release. I whispered Michael's name under my breath, testing whether it still carried weight. It did, but the sound trembled with cracks I couldn't ignore. When Michael called that evening, his voice was the same as always, measured, distracted, offering me details of meetings and schedules instead of intimacy. "How are things there?" he asked, not unkindly, but without real curiosity. "Fine," I replied, my throat tight. I almost told him the truth, almost confessed the loneliness that had devoured me, almost dared to say his absence had carved holes I no longer knew how to fill. But the words froze. What good would they do now? He wouldn't understand, or worse, he would. And then everything would crumble. After the call ended, I sat in the darkened living room, the silence pressing in once more. Only this time, the silence was layered with memory. Every corner of the room reminded me of the night before, the chair where Ethan sat, the couch where Lucas leaned close, the place by the door where they paused before leaving. I wondered if they thought of me too, or if for them it was nothing more than a fleeting indulgence. That uncertainty gnawed at me. Had I been just a diversion, or had they sensed the depth of my longing, the fracture in my life that begged to be filled? By the time night returned, I felt myself split in two. One part of me was loyal still, bound to Michael by years of history and promises spoken in good faith. The other part, raw and restless, yearned for the connection I had tasted. I drifted to the porch, staring out at the street where Ethan and Lucas had appeared. My chest tightened at the thought of seeing them again, but they didn't come. The night passed quietly, almost mockingly so, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I realized then that what I feared most was not discovery by Michael, it was the possibility of never feeling that alive again. As the hours stretched on, I sank into the weight of my choice. Infidelity was not a single act, I understood now, it was a door I had opened, one that could not be closed simply by pretending it hadn't happened. The memory of that night was a current pulling me forward, even as the world demanded I step back into routine, and in that tension, caught between guilt and desire, I sensed my story was only beginning.